For decades, this brand has literally been culturally synonymous with affordable hamburgers, French fries, and rapid service across, more than 45,000 global locations. But what if I told you that calling this absolute behemoth a restaurant company is actually a massive mistake? Welcome to This Explainer on Market Plainly, where we peel back the layers of universal beliefs and deconstruct the business models that secretly run the world. Today, we're starting with a fast food giant you only thought you knew.
So let's dive right into this. Millions of people think McDonald's is a food company. And it seems super obvious, right? You pull up to the drive-thru, order a Big Mac, pay for your food. Simple. But here's the crazy part. That transaction is just an illusion. It's covering up their true product. When you do a rigorous structural analysis of their corporate balance sheets and franchise agreements, it reveals this huge misalignment between public perception and economic reality. Structurally, they aren't a food service operator at all.
To put that into perspective, the stark financial reality is that McDonald's is sitting on a whopping $42.85 billion, yes, billion with a B, in net property, plant, and equipment. This staggering figure means real estate makes up roughly 60 to 80% of the company's total assets. They don't just flip burgers, guys. They are literally one of the largest single owners of commercial real estate in the entire world, built from the ground up to generate massive recurring revenue. The food? Well, the food is simply a low-risk mechanism to fund property acquisitions.
So here's our blueprint to deconstruct this empire. We're going to look at the fast food illusion, the Sonneborn engine, the infrastructure playbook, some of the franchisee friction, the digital toll gate, and finally, the ultimate empire.
All right, starting off with Section 1, the fast food illusion, or as I like to call it, burgers versus balance sheets. To really appreciate what McDonald's has pulled off here, we first have to understand the fundamental flaws of the traditional restaurant industry. Traditional restaurants fight a really tough uphill battle. They're incredibly sensitive to things like the volatile cost of goods, fluctuating agricultural commodity prices, localized inefficiencies, and of course, employee turnover. It's a tough business. But McDonald's corporate? They completely insulate themselves from these vulnerabilities. By transferring nearly all that day-to-day operational risk down to their third-party franchise operators, corporate totally avoids direct exposure to wage inflation and food waste. Instead, they just act as a financial partner and a landlord, collecting highly predictable, high-margin rent and royalties. Moving right along into Section 2, the Sonneborn real estate engine, which is really the genesis of this entire monopoly. To understand how they actually managed to pull this off, we have to look back at the strategic mastermind who changed the company's trajectory forever, a man named Harry Sonneborn. As the company's first president and CEO, he completely re-engineered their financial architecture. Looking back at the historical records, the founder, Ray Kroc, was actually really struggling in the mid-1950s. He was relying on this meager 1.4% royalty fee from franchisee sales, which left the corporation with virtually no cash reserves to finance their global expansion. But then, in 1956, Sonneborn steps in and establishes the Franchise Realty Corporation. He realized the real financial leverage wasn't hiding in the margins of a 15-cent hamburger. No way. It was in controlling the physical land along emerging transportation corridors. Fast forward to today, and the gross cost of that real estate portfolio approaches nearly $50 billion. Sonneborn famously summarized this exact paradigm shift directly to Kroc with a quote that just perfectly captures it. He said, "The only reason we sell 15-cent hamburgers is because they are the greatest producer of revenue, from which our tenants can pay us rent." Wow. The food is strictly a mechanism. It's basically the bait to get consumers in the door, generating the revenue required to fund real estate acquisitions and secure those massive rental yields for the corporate landlord.
So the absolutely crucial point here is this self-funding loop. Here is the exact playbook they run. Corporate borrows capital at long-term, fixed rates to secure prime real estate. Then they construct the restaurant and sublease the entire property back to a franchise operator. But here's the kicker. They introduce a massive markup of 20 to 40% on the root lease. Plus, they charge a variable rent that can be up to 16% of gross sales in the U.S. As inflation and sales volume increase, the franchisees' payments go up, but corporate's underlying fixed-rate mortgage costs, those stay totally flat. It is an elite, inflation-proof cash flow compounder.
And that brings us to Section 3, the infrastructure monopoly playbook, where we look at parallels in modern capital. Now, if we zoom out to the macro view, financial analysts interpret this model not as a restaurant at all, but essentially as a toll booth infrastructure. To really wrap our heads around this, we need to compare McDonald's to modern giants in entirely different industries.
The key term we need to talk about here is asset-light operations. This basically means transferring the daily chaos, minimum wage battles, localized supply chain bottlenecks, equipment maintenance, down to the franchisee, while McDonald's corporate just sits back and enjoys predictable cash flows. They dictate the structural operating environment, and if a franchisee doesn't comply, well, corporate wields the ultimate regulatory hammer: lease termination and eviction.
When we look at this comparative analysis, the evidence proves McDonald's behaves exactly like companies like Visa, BlackRock, or Tesla. Think about it. Visa doesn't take on credit default risk. They just own the transaction rails and collect a fee. BlackRock's Aladdin platform serves as the technological nervous system of global finance, enforcing a strict operating protocol. Tesla aggressively scales its supercharger network, making its North American charging system the default industry standard, turning physical nodes into an economic moat. And McDonald's? They are no different. They don't just sell products, they control the underlying platform, the real estate, and extract rent from every single participant in the ecosystem.
As you could imagine, this creates a really stark economic asymmetry. Corporate sits safely above the fray, acting as the landlord, totally immune to local labor unionization efforts or, say, fluctuating potato prices. Meanwhile, the franchisee, the tenant, absorbs all those local economic shocks, all while being contractually bound to pay massive fixed overhead and variable rent back to the mothership.
Let's transition to Section 4, franchisee friction, and the rising cost of this landlord-tenant divide, because this asymmetric engine isn't without its serious threats. It naturally leads to growing tension between corporate and the operators. After all, when you squeeze the tenant to protect the landlord, eventually the ecosystem pushes back.
Impartially looking at the facts, the pressure on franchisees has been immense. Corporate mandates like the Accelerating the Arches initiative required operators to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars into things like self-order kiosks and digital menu boards, while also paying substantial ongoing technology licensing fees. Add to that the elimination of Happy Meal toy subsidies. In response to this margin compression, independent operators actually formed the National Owners Association back in 2018. They were demanding structural changes, pricing independence, and a fairer allocation of costs across the board.
The friction became so intense that 1,758 stores changed hands in a single fiscal year. That is a historic 13% transfer rate of their domestic footprint. We're talking about a massive exodus of legacy, multi-generational operators who are just straining under the high-rent Sonneborn model during a cycle of macroeconomic tightening. Just for some context here, Burger King experienced only a 6% transfer rate over that exact same period.
Moving on to Section 5, the digital toll gate, and how they're securing the virtual interface. To adapt to this franchisee fatigue, protect their margins, and future-proof the entire business, McDonald's is evolving again. They are aggressively building a brand new kind of real estate, one that doesn't even require pouring a single drop of concrete. 210 million. That is the number of 90-day active users on the My McDonald's Rewards platform across 70 global markets. This digital transition is specifically designed to secure consumer attention in the 21st century, the exact same way physical site selection secured geographic monopolies back in the 20th century. Believe it or not, this digital ecosystem generated roughly $40 billion in system-wide digital sales in just a single fiscal year. Absolutely wild. With digital channels, which includes mobile app orders, delivery, and those self-service kiosks, now accounting for over 40% of sales in their top markets, this first-party data is basically becoming a virtual toll gate. A loyalty consumer visits a location 2.5 times more frequently and spends more than a non-loyalty member. By commanding this digital interface, corporate captures highly structured data for dynamic pricing and personalized marketing. This ensures they maintain their lucrative toll booth position totally regardless of what happens to the physical landscape.
Finally, Section 6, the ultimate business empire. Let's synthesize all of this. Let's pull all these threads together so we can fully grasp the true nature of this corporate behemoth and look at the financial results of this masterclass in platformization.
By actually owning the land, McDonald's captures lease spread margins and underlying property appreciation that traditional competitors just forfeit to third-party landlords. And the result? An unmatched 46.1% consolidated operating margin. To put that in perspective, traditional franchise operators like Yum! Brands or Restaurant Brands International, they have around 32 to 35%. That 12-point margin premium is the direct consequence of real estate ownership. It's honestly the absolute pinnacle of hospitality and retail efficiency.
So, tell me, were you surprised to learn that underneath the Golden Arches actually lies a commercial real estate monopoly? Drop a comment below if this paradigm shift surprised you. Like, did you realize that every time you buy fries, you're essentially funding a multi-billion-dollar land acquisition strategy? Also, Definitely let us know down in the comments which corporate empire you'd like us to deconstruct in our next explainer.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy grasping complex business strategies, finance, and economics without getting bogged down in all that dense corporate jargon, make sure to hit subscribe to Market Plainly. We love taking the world's biggest business mysteries and breaking them down into clear, visual, and authoritative explainers just for you.
Because at the end of the day, McDonald's greatest product isn't the Big Mac at all. It's one of the most successful real estate and franchise systems ever created, generating billions through land ownership, recurring rent, and massive brand power. Next time on our Business Empire series, we're going to see how IKEA completely reinvented retail through flat pack design and one of the most brilliant global supply chains ever built. It's truly one of the most efficient business models ever created. We'll see you in the next explainer. Until then, ask yourself, when you look at the biggest brands in the world, are you actually seeing what they sell, or are you just seeing the bait?